Good morning, folks. Hope everybody's having a great holiday weekend and enjoying your time off. This morning, I'm going to do something that I've been wanting to do for a long time, and that is get my worm bin set back up. I have uh, I have one of these tray style worm bins, which kind of has multiple trays that you can stack your worms. And when it's time to harvest, you put another tray on top. The worms migrate up, and you can harvest your castings out of your bottom tray. So I had this set up. I've had this for about 4 years, I guess, and I was running it continuously up until about last year when I got the new property over here. When I had that going, so I kind of just took it down and been waiting to get it set back up. So now I felt like it was a good time to just kind of go through some of the things I learned when using it the first go around. Some things that worked well for me and some things that didn't. So I'll just show you how I'm going to set it up this go around. One of the biggest things is this one's set up to it'll catch your leachate, and it's got a little spigot. So one thing that I learned was the worms tended to want to go down into that for some reason. So this time I'm going to use this permeable weed block. It'll allow the water to go down, but the worms can't migrate through it. So hopefully it'll keep most of my worms up here in the tray and not down in the bottom reservoir. So we'll just place that in. So what I'm going to use is I like to start with a nice quality soil. And this one I got from my buddy Big Worm on Instagram. I haven't even looked at it yet, but I know it's some good stuff. So yeah, definitely start with a nice soil in your worm bin. That's key. I got some water so I can moisten everything up. And I also have some cardboard, which was over kind of sitting on the ground, pre-moistened. I don't know if you can see that, but there's already like tiny little pot worms. There's all kinds of little microbes and stuff already in this. And that'll just help with help the worms get a jump start on getting all that carbon broken down. So one thing I like to do is I will just dry fit my soil, if you will. Oh, and you also need worms. I got these. I go down to the local bait shop and support local. So I bought red wigglers down there, and these guys are really ready to get into some soil and start working. But red wigglers are the best composting worms. They're really active. They eat a lot for their weight. So I'm going to start out with 4 cartons of red wigglers. And then I also have an avocado that went bad on me. So we'll take that, and that'll be kind of their first meal, if you will. So I like to dry fit my soil, like I said. So what that means is I will pour enough into the tray. So this is about the height that I want it. I want about half a tray full. And what that'll do is that'll leave you room for you as you start adding your food. The volume will increase. So if you go with half a tray, that's a good amount for the worms, and then it also gives you room to grow up. So I'll just dump that in there. And then I'll start with the weed block on the bottom. And my first layer will be this cardboard that we talked about. It's a good source of carbon. Worms like carbon, soil likes carbon, everything needs carbon. Alright, that's not working. Just shred by hand. Just put an even layer of this cardboard down. It's really wet. They're gonna break this down really fast, I think. A lot of times if you put cardboard in and it's too dry or it doesn't wet up, then of course the worms won't be able to get into it and start breaking it down for a while. So I like to pre-moisten my cardboard. So we'll put a good layer of that in on the bottom. A few more pieces. That should be good. Now I want to moisten the soil because that's too dry. Worms aren't going to want to do anything in that. So I'll just take a little bit of water, non-chlorinated. Just sort of mix that up until it's a good consistency. Definitely don't want your worms too wet. When the bin gets too wet, you get problems with like mites, and they can actually overpopulate your bin and make your worms where they're not happy. And a lot of times over moistening comes from adding too much food at one time, meaning your food scraps. So I mean, this is pretty good. This is forming a ball without any juice coming out. So I'll take just a little bit more water. Okay, that's a pretty good consistency. You could kind of almost hear it. You could hear it, but you can't see any water coming out. So that's how I like it to be. All right. So then basically just take that, put it into your tray. And again, I learned that the worms will tend to go down into the leachate sometimes, so that's why I did the weed fabric. Get all that in. And then you definitely don't want to pack this down. You just want to leave it loose. Get it in there nice and even. Now at this point, you can add your worms. But what I like to do is, because I have it, I'm going to use a little IMO4 right here off my pile. I'll just add a scoop of that, and what adding the IMO4 does is it just brings all those microbes that we're constantly working on getting into our soil. Now we kind of get our black gold started out with those same microbes. And it's just all about microbes and plants building relationships. So the sooner you get your microbes incorporated, the sooner those relationships can start. Alright, so we got an even layer of IMO4. We'll just knock a couple of these potato bugs out of here, pill bugs. Alright. So since we put that dry IMO4 in, I'm also going to just spray it down a little bit, just because it's super dry and I want to make sure those microbes are getting incorporated in here. Alright, so not too much. And now let's add the worms. I'll put one container in each corner. I think there's probably about 40 worms or so per container, if I had to guess. I'm not counting them. But you can see there's plenty in there. So now these worms, these are the castings. These worms have been in these containers so long that they've eaten everything, and everything is now worm castings. And by the time they get done in here, this will all be worm castings as well. So you can see they're already starting to get on and out of their pile and into the bin. And one thing I like to do, since I have it, is if I can find my avocado. Where's my avocado? Oh, there she is. So worms love avocados. They love any fruit. So I will take this avocado, and this will be kind of like my test to see how the worms are moving, what they're doing. So you can see this thing's pretty ripe. Doesn't make sense to put the avocado pit in there. Worms just aren't going to eat that. So I'll just take these avocados and put them face down, and we'll see when I check it, I'll know, okay, how much of the worms moved or what are they doing. So let me just get these babies active a little bit so they'll get going. And from there, I mean, you're pretty much set up. The thing is, the things I've learned on the first go around when using this, and this applies for any bin, is be patient. It's better to not check this more often than it is to check it. These worms don't need your help. And you got to think, when you put food in here, you know, the worms, they're going to eat it, but you don't want so much food that there's excess. So take your time when you're adding food to the bin and think of it from the worm's perspective. Okay, this probably weighs as much as 10 worms. So that worm's going to eat its body weight, I believe, in about a day. Each day they'll eat their body weight. So just kind of do some simple math before you go dumping too much food in there. Too much food will end up giving you have problems with mites. And there'll be these little red mites all over the place, and that can discourage people. They're not super harmful, but if there's too many mites, then they'll outcompete your worms, and it'll lead to problems in here. And another thing I do is I just took filter material from my aquarium, and I plugged all these holes because for some reason the worms kept trying to escape, and I don't know if it was just because the conditions weren't right or what, but once I put these filters on here, the worms pretty much didn't escape. One thing about worms is they don't like light, so if you have this in a bright location, you won't have to worry about escaping worms as much. Um, and pretty much, I think those are the basics. Now we'll just put this in a dark, cool area, and uh, and then we'll just keep checking back on it. But it won't be long before you see a big change in here, and we start getting some nice castings going. So definitely get a worm bin. You can also use a plastic tote to make one. You don't have to buy one of these kits. The biggest thing with the totes is also don't overwater, and it could be a good idea to just put yourself a little spigot in there as well, so you can drain out some of that leachate. The leachate you get, or worm juice, is really high in fulvic and humic acids. Those are key to plants absorbing nutrients and uptaking of minerals. So fulvic acid, it won't be high in NPK, which is um, your your um, your nutrients, but it will be high in those fulvic and humic acids. So definitely, I hope you guys like this video and you give the worm bin a try.